Has the coroner been notified?
They've been notified.
What about our LT?
Lieutenant's on his way.
Do we have the preliminary identification of our first male victim?
Not at this point.
What about the female?
We found her driver's license. Her name is Jessica Reinhardt. We're currently questioning the 2 students from the study group to confirm this information. Who do you want to be involved in notifying the family?
You and I should do it. We have what we need here. Let's get back to the station and see what information we could find out about the family. So what are the names on our victims?
Our female victim is Jess Reinhardt. With our male victim, all we know at this point is his first name, Eric. We've got someone looking into it. Our shooter's name is Marty Johnson.
Are we positive on the preliminary identifications?
Yes. Kate, the witness, only knew Eric's first name.
Let's keep working on Eric's ID. Let's take a look here, see where her parents live. We need to inform them right away. Here it is. Looks like Jessica's parents are Steve and Judy Reinhardt. Good, they're local. They live at 736 Westwood Drive. That should only take us about 10 minutes. Let's get over there right away.
Good evening, officers. Can I help you?
Good evening. Is this the Reinhardt residence?
Yes, it is.
Honey, what is it?
Are you Judy and Steve Reinhardt?
Yes?
I'm Officer Hicks. This is Officer Arnold. There's been an incident. May we come in?
Oh my gosh, what is it?
I feel it's best if we talk inside. May we come in?
Yes. Please, come in.
Please tell us what's going on.
There's been an incident involving Jessica.
Where is she? Is she hurt?
I'm sorry to inform you, Mr. and Mrs. Reinhardt, but Jessica was involved in a domestic violence incident with her study group, and she was killed.
Are you sure it's Jess?
Not our Jess.
Yes, it is Jess. Jessica was preliminarily identified by a member of her study group. I'm very sorry for your loss.
We just saw her last week.
Where is she now?
Jess is currently at the County General Hospital. The medical examiner will be contacting you shortly. If you'd like to reach out to them, I can provide you with their phone number. They'll be able to give you additional information.
I can't believe this is happening. Yes, we would like the number. Thank you.
Sure. The number is 867-555-1604. Is there anyone I can contact for you?
No. Thank you. We'll take care of it.
Steve, what about Elliot? He'll be devastated that his sister's gone.
I don't know. We should tell him now so he doesn't find out from someone else.
Yes, you're right. In this day and age, this kind of thing gets around through social media first before anything else. Here's some information you can look at when you're feeling up to it. It'll help you communicate this information to your family and friends. Also, I'd recommend keeping a journal or a notebook. Keep track of any important information or questions you might have over the next few days.
Thank you, Officer Hicks. We need to be by ourselves. You understand?
Of course. Please feel free to contact me with any questions or anything else I can do for you. May I call you tomorrow to see how you're doing?
Sure. That'd be fine.
That's always stressful.
Notifications are never easy. I think it went well, all things considered. They seem to take the news okay.
Yeah, you're right. It went well.
We did the best we could. Let's grab a cup of coffee on the way back.
Sounds good. Officer Hicks. Okay. Got it.
We're all set.
Hold on. We got the ID on our male victim, Eric.
Okay, let's get this started.
It says here that our second victim is Eric Tobias. He lives in Regal Court. He's from out of state, from Red Canyon, California. His parents are Sandra and Michael Tobias, and they live at 227 Woodcrest Drive.
We should contact their PD right away.
Officer Dixon.
Yes, hi. This is Officer Hicks from Cedar Crest, Maryland. We had a death involving a student here at Cedar Crest whose family is from Red Canyon, California, and we need your assistance in notifying his parents.
Absolutely. Anything we can do to help. Do you mind if I place you on hold while I get a colleague on the line? Denise, would you mind joining me over here? We have a death notification coming in. Officer Hicks, Denise Caldwell is joining us. She's our victim advocate.
Hello, Officer Hicks. How can we assist you today?
Yes, hello, Denise. Thank you for joining the call. Have you ever performed a death notification before?
Yes, we have. Our unit just went through death notification training.
Perfect. Okay. Here's what happened. Earlier today, we received a call about a domestic violence incident.
Are you Sandra Tobias?
Yes. What can I do for you?
I'm Denise Caldwell, a victim advocate with the police department. This is Officer Dixon. We have some news. May we please come inside and talk?
Okay. Sure. Come on in.
Thank you.
We received a call from Officer Hicks of the Cedar Crest Police Department. There was an incident involving your son, Eric. Eric was found dead in the apartment of a classmate. There was a domestic violence situation and he was present. I can call Officer Hicks from the Cedar Crest Police Department. Would you like to speak with him?
Yes, please.
Officer Hicks, this is Officer Dixon. I'm here with the Tobias family.
Hello.
I'm very sorry for your loss. I would like you to know that I'm here for you, to answer any questions you may have and help you with anything that I can as well.
Thank you for your kind words. How did this happen?
This is an active criminal investigation, and we are doing the best we can to find out what happened. Once we have more information about the investigation, we can speak with you in greater detail. We can tell you that Eric is currently at County General Hospital. The medical examiner will be contacting you, but if you'd like to reach out to them, I can provide you with their phone number. They'll be able to provide you with additional information.
I guess there's a lot for us to think about.
If there's anything that we can do, here's my card. I'll call you in the morning to see how you two are doing. I also have some very important information that may help you cope with your loss. And it's also a very good idea for you to write down your thoughts and questions that you may have in a notebook so you don't forget them.
I just can't believe this.
Please, let us know if there's anything we can do in this troubling time.
Well, that was difficult.
They really had a tough time with the news.
It's hard for any parent receiving this information. It's life-shattering.
Thanks for your help. This is a rough day.
Anytime. I'm glad that I can be there to help. Let's get together and talk in the morning.
That sounds good to me. I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, I apologize. Somehow I'll try to work the actual clip into the video, and I'll send you all a copy so that you can hear it more completely. So what were you able to gather from this so that I know how to proceed?
Okay, this is Madeline. I don't know, from the police officer, the two police officers that went to the first victim's home, just from the little bit that I could ascertain, to me, he wasn't, it was too upfront and out there. He wasn't gentle enough. I guess that's the word that I'm looking for in letting the parents know that their daughter was deceased. Plus, I didn't understand why they would go to their house without knowing who the second victim was, because the second victim could have been her brother. I mean, they didn't know who he was, so why would you, if they were able to that quickly find out who the second victim was, then why not wait until both victims were identified before, going to let anyone know what had happened?
Okay, so in the and now let me reiterate, this is a video from the FBI. So yeah, it could possibly say that his words, you might not be very compassionate and kind. You couldn't hear the tone of his voice, but what he did say, we're not to use platitudes and things, but I'm very sorry for your loss, and you're supposed to be very direct. If that was the case, that was the brother, for example, they would have made a second notification. You need to do it as quickly as possible. And the other details, the details of the investigation and the other people that are involved, did not involve Judy and Steve's daughter. Okay, they only are talking about the things that pertain to their family, their daughter Jessica. And if you you do not give details about the investigation, and they used, one of the things they did say is it's an ongoing investigation, and so we're looking into the details. What's pertinent is that Jessica was shot in a domestic violence incident in a study group in a fellow student's apartment. So they did know his name was Eric because one of the survivors in the study group identified him but didn't know his last name, which you couldn't hear. So they, just from saying Elliot and Eric, they would have known that they weren't the same person, but you would not be giving them details about the other people. The only thing that matters to the parents is what happened to their daughter. And you don't give them that extra information. And they do caution you about when you hear other details from social media and people. And I do have a video, hopefully you can hear her more clearly, of a woman, her name is Karen, whose daughter was killed. And we'll be talking about that in just a second here. So basically in the death notification, they talk about you plan what's going to happen, you prepare what you're going to do, you deliver the information succinctly but compassionately, right? And then you follow up. So you make death notifications with professionalism, dignity, and compassion, planning. You say who's going to do the talking, and the other person follows up, and you make sure if there's any children or outside distractions, you keep that away, and you get the people in a private situation and speak to them directly. So you also make sure you have all the information, since they didn't have until afterwards the identification of the second student. You wouldn't be doing anything about that second student because you don't know who he is or where he's from. And so you have to have everything definite identification. They verified that this was the parents who they were talking to, and they also advocated that they should talk to the brother before he hears other outside information. So then when you go, if you notice the second people, they stepped back from the door also. They identify themselves, they verify who they're talking to, they ask if we can come in, and they sit down. And you want to be at the same level, looking at them face to face, okay? And one of the reasons for sitting down is there could be very many very extreme reactions, and for safety's sake and comfortability. So when they got the verification of the second student's ID, they found out where he lived, and they contacted their police department, gave them the information, and the police officer and the victim advocate went to Eric's parents' house. And in this video, they were indicating that the parents were a little bit more upset. To me, it didn't look like they were either more upset, but that they weren't handling it. Well, I don't like to use the word not handling it well, but that they were affected more visibly. And so the lady said she's going to follow up. And in the car with the second set of from second police department, you couldn't really see it, but they both talked about what happened to kind of de-intensify the emotions of the situation, because it's intense when you're dealing with this kind of situation. And the second set with Denise, the victim advocate, and Officer Dixon, they made arrangements when they were leaving to talk and debrief and de-escalate a little bit in the morning. So we want to consider any special circumstances when preparing for a death notification, if they're out of state, if they're if there's a divorce in the family, if there's any kind of like if it was a difference between a shooting and an auto accident. And you want to use these plans. You plan, prepare, deliver, and follow up. So you try to utilize the standard procedure. Okay, I'm going to try to do Karen's video.
Well, I had 3 children. The oldest was Charlotte. I have a middle child, Andrea, and my son, Bill. We were always a really close-knit family. Charlotte, she was so sweet. She was a really quiet, kind of timid type of girl. She wasn't real headstrong. And I think part of that is that she felt she always wanted to please. She just was a really, really good kid. I guess maybe in the back of my head, I kind of had an idea that something really bad had happened. They told me that she had been stabbed 27 times and that she, by all indications, had been raped. That morning, she had been woken up by a thunderstorm that went through, and I heard it too as a pretty violent thunderstorm. She actually got up around 4:30, 5 o'clock, and decided to go out and get her papers delivered. I got a phone call from the morning call. So I got up and answered the phone, and it was her district sales manager. He said, well, we have a little bit of a problem. Her cart that she pushes was found, but she was not found. We have the police involved now because we found a newspaper and her Walkman in the side yard. And she always did have her Walkman on when she was out on her route. And so at that point in time, I knew that there was something drastically wrong. I kind of pretty much shut down. I wasn't eating, I wasn't drinking. I just kind of sat in the rocking chair, and as people would come and people would leave, and people would tell me things that they'd heard on the radio, or I just kind of like sat there and rocked, like unbelieving what was going on. It just doesn't happen. Not in Allentown, not to us. I was made aware that she was missing around 7 o'clock in the morning, and they came to do the notification around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There were so many family members there in my living room at that point in time. We went out into our kitchen, which had a French door that we closed, and they sat us all down at the table. My brother and I on one side, and the officer and the coroner on the other side, and told me that it was definitely Charlotte. And of course, I didn't really know how to react at that point in time because I think I had had enough information that I kind of knew that that's what they were going to tell me. It had to be done. I had to know it. I had to get the answers that they were able to provide. I know that they have to remain a little bit separated from what's going on. In a death notification, there's no easy way to handle that information, to either deliver it or receive it. It is an important piece. It has to happen. It seems like when the sun sets on the day that they die, it's like a finality for me. It's the last day that they were living, and it's done. I try and live with her happy memories. We talk about her often. We don't put her in the back burner. She's not in a closet somewhere. She's Charlotte. I had 3 kids. I still have 3 kids. Whenever anyone asks me, I had 3 kids. So a lot of people will say, oh, I have 2 kids, because they don't want anybody to ask them about that 3rd child. I'll tell anybody. She was my Charlotte.
Okay. I'm sorry. So, what were you able to get out of that I'm sorry?
Well, we could read, anyway, I could read the captions a lot better. So it was as if a 15-year-old child, it was a thunderstorm, and she awakened at about 4:30, decided to go out and do her paper route, and was attacked, raped, stabbed 27 times, and her mom was notified about 7:30 a.m. and relatives and everything started coming over to the house and everything. And by, I think it was 3 or 3:30, the police came and they went into the kitchen. She closed the French doors and was told that definitely Charlotte's body, that the body had been recovered, identified, and it was definitely Charlotte.
Okay. So, Yeah, that's pretty much. I'll send you. I'll chop this all together and send you a video, and hopefully you can individually play it, maybe with earphones or whatever, so you can get a little bit of the information. So the death notification can impact the family's recovery and grieving process positively or negatively, and many can remember how the words were told or the actual words that were told. So it makes a difference. You want to be very direct. You don't want to use vague words or descriptive words or, phrases that are not direct. You want to use the words killed, you said shot, took his own life, hit by a drunk driver and killed. So you have to be compassionate, and there's words that you don't say. You don't try to say, well, things like, I know how you feel, but convey, I'm sorry that I have to tell you this. I'm sorry for your loss. Once you receive the notice that a death notification has to be made, the first step is planning. You identify the decedent. You select a notification team. You should probably go with 2 people. You collect accurate information, which that's why they wouldn't talk about the first student until they had positively identified him. The next of kin and families will often question the death notification team about the identity. How is the decedent identified? You need to, in the first video with the 2 officers, the male and female officer, the initial identification of Jessica was made by a person that was actually present in the study group that she knew. This was Jessica Reinhardt, and she only knew the male student's first name. So you determine who the next of kin are, determine the location of the next of kin, and can you inform them in person? The professionals who are chosen to provide death notifications should have certain characteristics. They should be efficient, a good leader, a good listener, empathetic, and be trained. The death notification team may include law enforcement, a victim advocate, a medical examiner or coroner, or a chaplain. And if you are identifying a subject, the shooter's family, you would not use the same team. Or if there are multiple shootings or multiple deaths, each family would have their own team that would come and talk to them about the death. And they have contact information, and you follow up. So you don't want to mix things up. And if you're identifying the subject or the suspected killer's family, you don't send them a victim advocate. Okay. There are 2 people that go. There's a primary person that delivers the death notification. If you noticed I know you couldn't really hear it, but you could see that one primary person was doing the talking. It was the first set. It was the male police officer that did most of the talking, and the other person is just kind of the support person is monitoring the scene, and they're concerned with the scene safety and securing the scene and checking out the reaction. So in the second one, the victim advocate was the main person talking, and the police officer was the support person. So it is really essential to have as much accurate information as you can at the time that you go to talk to the family. And not all information may be shared with the next of kin if there is a criminal information. So this is one of the reasons you're not talking to the Jessica's parents about the other people that were involved in the shooting. They're concerned with Jessica And common questions would be, how do you know it's my loved one? What happened? Where did the death occur? When did this happen? Where is my loved one now? In one video I have of a simulation that I'll be doing later on, maybe in a trauma class, critical incident class, it was a simulation, and the family was saying, where's their body? And I'm like, that's not an accurate response, because I'm not going to say, where's my daughter's body? I'm going to say, where's my daughter, right? So there's a, where is my loved one now? And once you've gathered all the information needed, the second step is to prepare to actually deliver the death notification. Pardon me. So you need to understand how your group operates, okay? And what the standard operating procedures are if you're working with an agency or department, okay? So we're going to go together, and you're not, if you're in a police car, you're going to park not right in front of the house, because that's alarming, right? When you come up to the door, if you see police officers at your door, it's not normal. You know something's wrong. What's going on? You're automatically on alert. We want to do it as fast as possible. You don't want to delay. You don't want to wait to the morning. So we want to be prepared for the response. We want to know if they have any medical history. We want to know about family, friends, if we can. There's a pocket guide that I'm going to send you in a PDF. So there's different questions or reactions in there. The loved ones may display a number of reactions to receiving a death notification. They could be stunned, they could be in disbelief, they could go out and mow the lawn, they could scream and shout and hit you. But we need to understand and help them to understand that these are normal reactions to an abnormal event. There may be shock, disbelief, denial, fear, anger, confusion. It's not unusual for them to get angry with the messenger. They might be immobilized. They might have that fight or flight or freeze reaction from our brains, okay? Once you gather all the information and prepare, the third step is to deliver. You knock on the door, confirm the identity of the person, answer the door. Are you Judy and Steve Reinhardt? You ask to enter the home. You encourage everyone to sit down, the team as well as the next of kin. And once everyone is seated, the primary notifier delivers the notification. Again, they tried to convey empathy, which didn't really come across so well, but you want to be empathetic and compassionate there. The primary notifier should briefly review what happened prior to revealing the news. There's been a domestic violence incident in a study group on campus involving Jess, and she's been killed. Or we found John in Oak Park with a fatal gunshot wound. It appears self-inflicted. We use the deceased's name and not language such as body or the remains. You might be prepared to repeat the information and to use these words directly: death, died, and several times, because often when you're getting this type of information, it's not easy to absorb. Okay, the support person is responsible for monitoring the next of kin for any type of reaction and scene safety. And once you notified, the family might ask a bunch of questions. Okay, do you have any comments at this particular time?
Yeah, Trish, you said that you're supposed to be direct. So your loved one was killed, or Charlotte, I'm just using that name, Charlotte, was killed by a drunk driver, or something like that. You're not supposed to say she was hit by a car. She was killed by a drunk driver. Is that what you said?
Right. I mean, she was hit by a drunk driver and killed. I mean, if you want to say that, you're not going to say hit by, I mean, if she was hit by a car, then yeah, you could say that, but you're not just going to leave it out there to be
for them to want. Oh,
right?
Okay.
We don't want it to be there to be any doubt, right?
Okay. And then the second question is, you said that like if there was a perpetrator, an advocate isn't sent to their family. Let's say the perpetrator was killed also, but an advocate is not sent to that family. Did you say that?
Right. They say that because there's a difference between a victim and somebody that is an antagonist. So it confuses roles it's like there is a special person in a police department, or there are in the counties advocates for victims, but the subject is not a victim. They're the one that did it. So they treat them differently in that respect, because although the perpetrators, or the alleged perpetrators' family is also hurting, right? There's reactive because a friend or a family member has supposedly done something and wrong, aggressive, and they also are killed, right? Or if you go in, as you're using the example of a drunk driver that killed somebody but also died, I mean, that person's family is still suffering, but the treatment is slightly different in the fact that there's an investigation going on and there's a separation of roles.
Wow.
It doesn't seem, I would never have thought that either. So the questions on either side would be, where's my loved one now? May I see him or her? What is an autopsy, if an autopsy is being done, and why is it necessary? And when we don't know answers, we have to be forthright and say, I don't know. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know. I'm going to look into it and get back with you. We do want to see if there's anyone we can contact. You couldn't see it in the first scenario, but they did ask if there's anyone, the two officers, the male and female officers, did ask if there's anybody that we can call for you. We don't want to leave people alone. We want to be able to have them have support. And I have a copy of this brochure, Coping with Grief, and two brochures that you can pass on to people if you should need. We provide community resources and contact information, a coroner, crimes investigation or compensation. There's other referrals that they might need, request to follow up in 24 hours. This was something surprising to me, to encourage the next of kin to record questions and thought in a notebook or journal, because we have things that come up to us after an incident, any incident that's traumatic or surprising, and And then later on, we want to get that information and we haven't remembered. And so we want to help address these issues and feelings and questions in any situation, but particularly if we're working with a death notification. Providing death notifications is stressful, and so we need to prepare with statements that are compassionate but also not misleading or trite. I'm so sorry. This is harder than most people think. Most people who have gone through this react similarly to you. People can experience many different feelings at this time. Sometimes people are angry. Sometimes people are just wounded. Okay. This may be one of the most difficult times of your life. There are many statements that the next of kin may not find helpful. Do not share personal stories of loss. Your loss is not the same. I can't remember who I talked to about something, and I had gone through something similar, and they indicated to me that it was different. I can't remember the situation. It's vaguely in me that I had suffered a similar situation. And while we do understand, because we've all suffered, it's not the same. I lost my daughter, but it's not the same as having an illness take her life as opposed to a person taking her life. Okay. In Karen's Stroyer situation, she talks about, at that particular time, she says, I have 3 children. I lost my daughter. Sometimes I say I have 2 living daughters. Sometimes I say that I have 3 daughters, but then you have to go through an explanation of what happened. So sometimes it's just like to save, depending on the intimacy of the people, I may or may not share what happened, right? I may only say that I have 2 daughters. I have 2 living daughters. The daughter that you're familiar with is my second daughter. It's my middle child. So I don't say she's not the youngest. She'll never be the youngest because Elena was the youngest, right? But, when I introduce them, I don't, or I talk about them, I never indicate that there isn't somebody else that was in our family, but I don't always go into all the details with everybody, right? So some things that we might not say, I know how you feel, because we don't. Time heals all wounds. It doesn't always. It doesn't often. You need to be strong. No, we don't need to be strong. We need to process and be who we are. You'll get over this someday. They may not. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. You must go on with your life. You will find closure. They may not, especially if there is a situation where they don't feel justice was done. Okay. Some notifiers want to say anything to the next of kin to relieve some of the pain, but sometimes these statements can be damaging. He didn't know it hit him. It's best to remember him the way he was. You don't need to know that. When I'm suffering something, I don't want to hear, I don't need to. How do you know what I need, right? You don't want to see him. They often do want to see their loved one. Okay. Sometimes the condition of the remains are not they could be mutilated, right? So it'd be very disturbing. Not too long ago, a friend's husband passed away. He was in the hospital. He died, okay, but we can say passed away because I'm not notifying him. He complications to a surgery, and they didn't want to show her the body at the hospital because he was all puffed up. She had also lost her first husband to death, and she was familiar. He got swollen up from dialysis and different things, so it didn't disturb her. But sometimes we try to protect people, and we want to avoid religious phrases. Think of all your happy memories. Well, people would rather have their relative than happy memories, right? So we want to be direct. Okay, cautious about presenting the facts. We don't want to say, well, I think something about, I think, because we want to have the absolute facts. So we want to follow up with the next of kin with 24 hours. We want to give them an opportunity to ask questions. We want to provide them with the personal effects. They should not be disposed of. None of us at this point are dealing with a criminal investigation team, so we might not have a need to deal with this type of thing. But if there's blood or something on their belongings, you're not going to want to throw it out. Might want to have them cleaned before returning them, but the family has the right to have whatever their loved one, their belongings, right? We might have to help them deal with media intervention, people bothering them, or reporters or friends talking about what's going on. And we want to be able to provide them with resources. We don't want to hurry. We want to be able to close the conversation in a good amount of time that's comfortable to the family members, and we want to be able to provide them with information, right, of things where they can go. At first, they might not be interested or needed support groups, but we also know that there's those type of things available. So once you leave the next of kin location, you need to talk among yourselves with your team. You talk about your experience, because it's obviously when you're dealing with intense situations, it does affect us. We talked about a couple weeks ago how certain movies or whatever affect us, because they're very real to our feelings. So we also want the team to be able to discuss the next of kin's reactions, but as well as our personal reactions. We want to reduce our stress and seek appropriate resources to help us with dealing with some of these stressful situations. We would try not to make a death notification by telephone unless it's absolutely necessary. In the video, the East Coast Police Department was able to contact the West Coast Police Department, where the one student, Eric's family, lived, and they were able to send somebody out. So you want to find out who's responsible for the next of kin's, what agency, or if you have a colleague that's there that can go in that area to deliver the notification. In the case of the police department, the one jurisdiction requests a personal notification, but the primary police department agency was available to answer questions to the second families, next of kin. If I mentioned, if there's multiple death notifications, there should be a separate team to go to each family. I wouldn't go to 3 different families. Okay. And
people started putting thoughts in my mind that, oh, maybe we should go and look in a dumpster, or maybe we should, and that just completely flipped me out. And at that point in time, I said, I have to go. I have to go to where they are, where the police are actively working this scene. And so I did walk up there, and they kind of like pushed me off to the side and said, you know, we can't let you in any further. It's better if you go back to your house and wait. And I said, well, I need to know something, anything. You've got to give me something. And they really couldn't tell me anything at that point in time. So I went back home to wait. When I had to tell them, and I opted to do it, I didn't let anyone else do it. I kind of sat them down. We sat, I remember, on our front porch steps. And my mom was there to kind of back me up if I kind of didn't know where I was going at one point in time. And I just told them that their sister was hurt. She wouldn't be coming back. Somebody took her life. And not sure that they really grasped it. Somebody that's having somebody just show up at their doorstep without having any inkling that anything has happened. Definitely, you have to understand that the person behind that door is going to react almost in a shock and not be able to process any other information. So you have to be as compassionate as possible and then be able to give them maybe a hard resource to hang on to for when that shock wears off, to be able to know where to look to get the information that they may not have been able to absorb at that point in time. You don't know when you give that news how it's going to be taken in. I mean, you can have somebody that completely goes off the wall, which is completely understandable. You could have somebody that kind of shuts down and just doesn't respond back. The best thing I can say is just try and be as compassionate and offer those resources and just, you know, try and understand from their point of view what you're telling them and how you would feel if somebody told you the same thing. Obviously, you have to get the news somehow, and it's not an easy piece of news to be delivered, either for the deliverer or the receiver.
Okay. It's estimated that on the scene of an accident or an a safety incident, the National Transportation Safety Board estimates that 3 to 6 family members arrive on the scene to check out what happened there. And they want to create a realistic expectation when the family goes there. We want to be able to deal with effectively social media. It can be a challenge to death notifications. They might find out something before an official actually gets to them, and they'll be angry that they heard about the incident from social media or inaccurate information. You want to make sure that children are not present for the initial notification. Children should not be used to translate if the people do not speak that English. Death notification should be delivered by a person that the child trusts, and they should be sitting at the same level. We need to be aware of if there are elderly people or people with disabilities. And I have a copy of the Coping with Grief brochure and the pocket guide that the officers passed out. So before we go on, this is kind of a strange thing a subject to include, I guess, in general chaplaincy, because more often than not, we're not going to be doing this. We're not going to be in an official capacity or part of a team. If that's something that's interesting to you, then there are our local agencies that you could perhaps get involved in to help in this area, right? Anything that you guys took away from this very garbled session so far?
Well, here I go again. I have another question. You said that the guidelines are if they ask to see the body because they're in disbelief or whatever, so they ask to see the body, and so they must be allowed to see the body. So my mind immediately went to Sandy Hook and Uvalde. And they said that so many of those children were so riddled up with bullets that they really couldn't be identified by their face or anything like that.
Jesus.
So am I to understand that no matter what, because the officers were telling parents, were asking, I want to see my child, and the officers were saying, no, you don't want to see your child. So
what were they talking about on the scene, or were they talking about in the coroner's office or the hospital?
I don't think any of them went to the hospital. I think they all went straight to the coroners. But and I know they show the bodies on like a screen or something now. You don't actually, well, anyway, here in Detroit, I don't know about other places. They show it on a screen now, from my understanding. But wouldn't that be, I understand that it's the parent or the loved one, but to see something like that, wouldn't that be double trauma, triple trauma, quadruple trauma, to allow them to go through that? So there's nothing that will say, no, we can't let you see that. They absolutely have to let them see that.
I would have to check on with the department what their actual, if they would ever say, you absolutely can't, because I can't see how they have the right to say that. The person may not. I mean, obviously, in when you're your loved one is so damaged that they're beyond recognition, that is such a traumatic thing. But how are they going to know that it's absolutely them, right?
Okay, I'll give you a fingerprint. But I don't know. I guess that's,
I can't say that I would know that they would ever say you cannot ever see them. I think they would limit it. Obviously, when you saw this lady, Karen, she went to where they found Charlotte's body, and it was roped off or whatever, and they wouldn't let them in. But eventually, you have to provide the person to do the funeral or whatever, however they're going to deal with cremation or whatever. They have to do that. So I would have to check if there's ever any cases where they do say that. It just seems to me, just like I can't in patient rights, you can't make them take their medicine, you can't make them do things, you can't restrain them legally. I mean, they have rights. So it may be that they would regret it. They would rather not have seen that, but I would have to check into that. I mean, you could check into that too. I would, if there's cases where they absolutely don't, or if they're unrecognizable, if they would just say we've identified them from dental records or fingerprints. like you, it would seem that some of it would be worse. But there's also loss where you can't process it. Like if there is no, like missing in action, you know, and they never find the person, how do you process and finalize that that's actually your loved one?
Okay, so then therefore, it's understandable why the person said, where's the body now? Okay, where's the body now? Because they have to process and they need to see where's the body now, because it could still be like with that young man some years back, that they left his body lying out in the street for about 10 hours or so before it was taken, picked up and taken to the coroner. So I guess, different people process things differently then. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm not sure if ever there's a situation where it's just, just a pile of, just unrecognizable. If it's just bones and flesh garbled up from an explosion or something, I don't know how they could. But, yeah. Go ahead, Anna.
I would think too, the reason why people have to see the body, even if they can't recognize it, is to bring closure to, as a family member or what have you. Just like when my son died, I was across town at church and they said they had called the coroner, but I told them, don't move the body because I have to see it. I have to see for myself, because sometimes you just don't believe, or it's just so unbelievable. So I couldn't see how, and even if it was unrecognizable, most of the time they said they need to identify it, even if they do it with the teeth or not. And like for one of the sister's sons, we went down to see, and like Dr. Matlin said, you don't get to get close to the body. You're looking on like in a TV or a glass or something like that. And they were the mother. They couldn't even recognize it, that was their child, because they had swollen or what have you, but still brought some closure by going down there. But if we didn't know who he was, you wouldn't know who he was.
Right. I mean, sometimes you can recognize the clothing that they're wearing. And some people are fine, and they say, no, I don't need to do that. Just wait till it goes through the funeral process. Go ahead, Etta.
Yes, I know in the corrections, when we have something like that is not recommended that the family, view the body. We have the medical examiner, like for the city of Detroit, their office, coroner office, or they may have the doctor at the hospital, somewhere like that. However, from my recollection, if the family still wanted to view the body, they still, they could not stop them from viewing the body.
Okay.
Their loved one.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I apologize that, even for me, when I was watching this originally and, the processing, there is noise in the video. And so I will get those little clips inserted somehow separately from this, and perhaps you're able to, if you take the time to watch it later, our class, we can, come up with a little better. Okay, so anything else?
No, very informational.
It's very different, right? Like when Kathy was contacting people, some people are just not interested in it, but it's part of the course. And if you're involved in a critical incident team at a hospital or or a police department or, you know, emergency room or emergency services. It's part of life for those chaplains, right? So it's something that we can use some of that information when we are talking to people about lost loved ones. Okay, so we're going to cover a little bit more about trauma. I know it was a little bit scanty, the information that we presented with over the last 2 weeks with the crisis intervention and trauma. So the Greek word for trauma comes from wound, and it's a response to any event that shatters your safe world so that it's no longer a place of refuge. So some things, sometimes people deal with situations that we don't recognize as earth-shattering or threatening to their safety. But if you do not feel safe in your world, then that is an evidence of trauma. And I think with the social media and showing natural disasters and magnifying every shooting that happens that we never heard about before, it makes us all feel that this isn't a safe world, and it can cause people to have a difficulty in managing life. So trauma is a normal reaction to abnormal events, right? It's if you witness a bombing in front of you, it's abnormal for you not to react, not to feel adrenaline, not to have it shake you up, right? There's something wrong with you. And we have sociopaths today, and that they just don't have any feeling about what's going on around them or the suffering that they inflict on people. And when we have all these games and vivid movies and that type of thing out there, people become desensitized to the actual pain. And both Madeline and I were talking several classes ago about how these things we're not comfortable with certain movies or scenes because it affects us. And I found this a Christian chaplaincy training group that I was looking at some videos, and the director was talking about our mind does not recognize the difference between a story, our brain, and an actual event, so that when we're reading a book or seeing a scene that's fiction, our brain picks it up and processes it as an actual event. And so that's one of the reasons why we have some of the reactions we do when we see scary movies or violent scenes or even intense emotional things. I think it's a movie with Russell Crowe called A Beautiful Mind. I think that's what it is. And my family was watching it and it bothered me, and I didn't like it. It made me feel very, very uncomfortable because I guess I can identify with people's pain and suffering, and it just was very intense. So our reactions to these things are normal reactions. This is how God made our bodies and our minds to process these things, to protect us, and we get the chemicals released. But when you are unable to adapt and you're overwhelmed, that's when we consider this actual trauma. Often a person experiences a sense of powerlessness. Okay, any thoughts? Okay. Trauma has a powerful effect on people's life. It disrupts how you process the information. We talked about the interaction between the two sides of the brain and the chemicals that kind of cut things off. And sometimes we're so focused on the reaction that we can't think straight. And that happens often when after an accident or after a person dies, we need help to walk through our normal, or if you normal, just day-to-day life and decisions when you get a scary diagnosis. Okay. You can often have difficulty evaluating the reality or the strength or the measure of the event or what's going on around you. You interpret it in a certain way. When if 3 people see an accident, each person might store the event in a completely different manner or see it differently. Sometimes when you have witnesses, 3 or 4 different people will have 3 or 4 different descriptions of people involved, clothing, or what actually happened. But it affects how we experience what happened. We've learned that it actually does make changes in how our brain works. When people especially have suffered multiple traumatic events, that it changes how our brain operates and processes things. So intense stress or trauma is accompanied with the release of hormones and other chemicals, and it's the most significant factor determining whether or not a person has become traumatized. So we have like adrenaline, or God provided adrenaline, so that gives us the extra oomph we need to deal with a situation. But if it maintains a high level of cortisol or adrenaline in our system, our body isn't made to sustain that on a long-term basis. So it can change how our body works. And the more we understand about trauma, the better equipped we are to help. So we want to be understanding that not everybody reacts to a situation in the same way. Some people might have dreams, invasive thoughts, a feeling that their body is on high alert. When several years ago, a lady that was a police chaplain was talking about how the police officers are on high alert and hyper vigilant during their shift, and not having enough time to have those chemicals diminish in their system, and they go back to work their shift 12 hours later without having their body rest and their minds rest. So it over a long term, it can make us very tired and fatigued and ineffective and weary. When we have a trauma in our lives, it changes the way we look at life. When we have a belief in God and a disastrous situation invades our life, sometimes Christians have questions about God's goodness, questions about his faithfulness, questions about our faith. And what we assume is, my grandmother always used to say, everything's going to work out. She was just very pie in the sky. It's all good. And she had many bad things happen to her, but sometimes it affects how we see reality. we can't live in the heavens all the time. We have our feet planted here on the earth, so we have a combination of how we deal, because we're Christians, with life. Our feet are planted in the earth, but our spirit is walking with God. And I'm addressing this about Christians because sometimes we don't understand how people can get their faith in God shaken. So I'm speaking about Christians, but the world too has assumptions and beliefs about life. And these things do affect them as well. And unthankfully, they don't have that interaction with God to help sustain them. So often we meet people that are super positive, and we meet people that are super negative and gloomy, and everything is bad. Trauma challenges our belief about that we have the ability to handle life. And in reality, we need to be yoked together with God. I know people that have no faith system, and it makes me wonder, where do they get their strength from? Over 40 years of walking with God, I'm learning more and more not to trust my own strength and resilience, although I have a somewhat hard head and I can be very persistent. But that's not enough. And when you feel like I can't handle it, then we need that support. I think you all know people who just feel an inability to cope. I'm thinking of a particular person that just suffered homelessness as a teenager, and family members that were addicted, and a wonderful person, kind, but just getting through every day is a lot. And that's a Christian. So yeah, challenging their belief they have the ability to handle life. Then you just don't have the strength to get up in the morning, and everything is just overwhelming. People are silent. There's no words to describe the overwhelming feeling, the drowning feeling. People don't want to hear about it. They get tired about the focus on the pain or the reaction to the situation or the things that happen to them. People, because no one understands, might withdraw, which is a dangerous situation. It's not healthy to be alone. God made us for a family and a community. So we need to be kind with one another. And Christians are often not kind with one another, because when we're not going through a situation and we feel strong, we just say, well, get over it, right? Sometimes. I've done it. I'm sure you have. So when we feel like it's hopeless, we don't want to continue. There's intrusive thoughts. And some images keep coming back if you were assaulted, for example, or for example, if you saw a family member's remains that were horribly changed by what they went through, the attack or medical emergency that they suffered. Those things are very vivid very often and intrusive and disrupt our daily lives. When we have suffered trauma, we don't see ourselves in the image of God. We don't see ourselves as victorious. We don't identify with the risen Savior. We lose confidence. We lose the thought that I can't handle this. We might look at ourselves as less than other people, or incapable, or we don't have a right evaluation of ourselves. The Bible talks about not to think of ourselves more highly than we ought, but doesn't say we shouldn't think of ourselves well. So it affects who we see, what we see ourselves as, and who we see ourselves as. And it can affect us physically. It affects our ability to understand. It affects our emotions and our behavior. Any thoughts? Go ahead, Etta.
Well, I think it also affects our support team. Let's say our family members, could be spouse, children, and so forth too. Sometimes I don't think they probably know what to say, how to say it. And that's why I think it's important for when someone's going through trauma, that, it's a family thing. I think they need to seek counseling through the church, or counseling in the community as a family, because it's going to affect you and those around you. And the healing process, as we've seen it in the scriptures, and we've seen it, through this class, it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's going to be something that we have to work through. If we are Christians, then we have scriptures, we have the Bible, we have others that we can talk to. No one knows what we're going through, but God. And so it's important that we, as Christians, go to our scriptures and then verbalize to others what we're going through. Maybe someone has gone through something similar, maybe not the same, but a word from them, a scripture that they can direct you to, can help you in that situation. Now, these are just my thoughts. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, there needs to be an education that's where we can step in with families, right? Because it's hard to support someone and hard to deal with somebody that's always depressed or always affected by something that they went through. And when Vietnam veterans, often they internalize it. They don't share some of the things that they went through overseas, and they're affected. And so, we don't understand how they can't do normal things. I knew a vet, and he was going through some tests to apply for disability, right? He was a Vietnam vet, and he had done some terrible things over there. And, the doctor would ask him questions, and he was just supposed to answer this or that or the other, with certain yes or no. And he just was like not cooperating. And it's like, why can't you just answer the question, And so they don't respond in a way that's normal for everyday life. If you were on a hallucinogenic drug and you saw a pterodactyl flying at you, you would naturally duck and bat your hands away at them, right? And so for us looking at the person, that's an unnatural, weird thing to do, but this is a natural reaction to what his drug-induced state was producing, right? So if he didn't do that, that would be strange. And we don't understand because we're not experiencing it. And I think having somebody that you can talk to. I knew another young woman who, I didn't know her well, had several, I think it was kidney transplants. And you're talking about that before she was 40 years old. And her family just couldn't deal with her. They were separated from her regular life because she was all involved in that survival. And so her community was like the transplant support community, right? Who understood what she was going through. And you often find that somebody is an alcoholic and their family sticks with them until they get dry. And then after that, they split apart because they just, they stuck with them while they were doing what they needed to do, but because of the disintegration and the lack of understanding and communication, they just couldn't continue. They were had gone two different emotional paths. So we need to be able to have somebody that we can talk to and help us go through it. Right? Not several years ago, one of us was talking about how their pastor didn't understand that they just needed a break. They needed just a sabbatical time, to not be involved in ministry, but they were able to share with us. So it's difficult. It's difficult for the family. And when you're talking about therapy, it can be expensive, right? We don't often have means to pay for it. So we have to come up with means to help people to recover and to see what they're going through and how to deal with it in the healthy ways that God has given us to recover. Okay, so trauma intervention. We want to give the victim a chance to tell their story. People are often, just in this conversation that we've been having, people just don't get tired of listening to the same old thing, but they need to be able to be able to express how they see things without judgment. Okay. Trauma intervention helps us analyze the impact that traumatic events have farther on down the line and to evaluate where we are in the restorative process. We want to help the victim see the event with a different lens, right? When we lose a spouse of 50 years, we've become identified as being that person's wife or husband, right? But when that person is no longer there, it seems disloyal to stop seeing myself as that spouse. But I am who I am now, and that person, while they occupied such a great part of our lives, and the same with the event, right? The thing that happened that so strongly affected them, that becomes such a great part of that person, but we are not identified by our diagnosis. Often people identify with having a brain injury, or, you know, having autism, and we are more than a diagnosis. We are more than an event. So we want to be able to have them see what happened to them through a bigger picture, and not just the little telescopic or the microscopic eyepiece that they're looking for. We want to help them find where their strengths are, in what did God give them to help them get back up. Okay, we're not just going to go have them look at the TV or grab a bottle, but we want them to be able to exercise the different things that they have within them, and different mechanisms to be able to deal with. You know, sometimes I get resentful of the word cope, because it makes it sound like we're just hanging on and just trying to get by. And yeah, we do feel like that when we're in a very stressful situation. But when we break down different steps of how we can walk from point A to B to C to D, to navigate that. If you can picture walking on a path through the forest or whatever, and on either side of you, as you're walking, there's lions, or there's some kind of a fierce animal that's, you know, striking their claws at you, trying to reach at you with your claws. Well, how do you get past each one of those claws and to move on to the next step? And there's different just grounding, where you're concentrating on the feeling something, just touch something and feeling it, you know, sensory images, and actually touching something, being aware of taking off your shoes and feeling the grainy dirt on the floor, or the grass between our toes, you know, getting other sensory input to help us be aware of more than just the thoughts or the feelings that we're going through. We want to help them establish goals to move forward, to reach for, and help them get there. How we want to try to obtain certain results, and help them do different things to obtain those goals, or reach those milestones. And help them have a different perspective, which often kind of goes along with reframing the event. But often we have a viewpoint that, I think in our discussions, we can see that sometimes we see things differently, the same scene, and we have different images or different insights into that, and providing different insights into what people are going through. Now, we talked about recovery goals very briefly last week. Before we refresh those thoughts, any comments or questions up to this point?
Yeah, I This is Madeline. Just thinking about what you just said, and it brought me to the death of what was he, a football player? I can't even think of his name right now, but and it said how blacks and whites saw the exact same court trial, and but viewed it entirely different, had different thought process, completely different on you know, what went forth and everything. And so one side, when OJ Simpson.
O.J. Simpson.
O.J. Simpson.
So when he was found not guilty for a great part of the black community, they found it, you know, to be a joyful situation, whereas a great part of the white community looked at that exact same court trial and everything and found it to be devastating. So yeah, you can see and view an exact same situation, but because of your well, not culture, your social interactions, your upbringing,
your set of experiences.
Yeah, your set of experiences. Thank you. You see things in an entirely different view. And then I wanted to comment on the veterans that you were speaking about. I don't understand how you can go over and fight a war, especially those that are in a tanker, because that loud vibrating noise constantly and the smell of the fumes and all that. How in the world do they bring them back here and not give them therapy? Even if they say they don't need it, they should have to go through you know, so many sessions of therapy, because who could be bombarded with that constantly? The noise of just the shooting, the tanks, the missiles, and not have it affect their psyche. I don't understand why they don't. But I understand, because they don't, I can understand why so many of our veterans are, you know, suffering traumas.
Right. I think first I'm going to say about I think it's wonderful that we have come from different backgrounds and have different experiences and have these discussions so that we can look at events through different eyes, and how you know what you've experienced and why you would think that way. And I think it's important for us to have an understanding of other ways of seeing things, and I think we're growing in that, and that's good. And as far as the veterans, you know, it was in World War I that people started to realize that, you know, going away to serve in a war, and what you've come back, they called it shell shock back then. And, you know, just it's a growing understanding of what's necessary to survive, right? You kind of shut down and you kind of internalize that, and that's why there was, you know, as throughout time, there's different addictions, and to get through these type of situations. And as far as, you know, when they return, I don't know if there's some type of a debriefing type of situation that they go through, but it would make sense, because, you know, when I've seen chaplains doing and hospital staff doing debriefings when they're going through, you know, having multiple codes, right? You know, dealing with those situations and processing it. So there should be something, and but not everybody is ready to face certain experiences. And we deal with people all the time, don't we, that say there's nothing wrong with them, when we can very clearly see. I mean, even just in normal events, a normal week, we see somebody that seems affected and they say, "What? I'm fine. I don't want to talk about it." So also, when you're going back to people's patient rights, you can't force somebody to be treated unless you go to court.
Yeah, but the military, they can force them to go through it. It's a whole different ball game there. And not only with the military, I think police officers. That's why you probably have so many police officers going to the bar and drinking and everything, because they need a debriefing every so often too. Because if you're dealing with not only just killing, but the stress of the job of dealing with having to break up altercations, it's like having to watch your back all the time. So, right. Yeah, I don't know.
So I don't know, like, if the military has some type of process or not, but it would make sense, and it would make sense to have a certain amount, right?
All right.
And the thing is, often we don't know, or they don't know of the benefits that they have that can help them. They don't have an advocate. They don't go to an advocate to say, well, this person could tell me that you have this ability to get training or treatment, funding. They just don't, maybe just don't get told or realize that there are. And that's the same with the community, right? That people don't realize that there's resources that not even affiliated with government agencies that we can tap into to help us, to help each other. It's just, so it's a matter. That's what it's important for us when we're talking about education. We can inform people of different places and sources to help them with things that we need, and don't have to just battle it out alone.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we're talking about, and this can be dealt with, even applied to normal difficulties that we go through, right? Even just illness, to help reduce the frequency of symptoms. When we have a cold, we treat the fever, we treat the sore throat, we treat the headaches, and you reduce how much and how often you feel that. Well, also with the panic or the invasive thoughts or the hyper alertness or uneasiness, we help them reduce the frequency of flashbacks, whatever. And then reduce the fear of the symptoms. If you have a panic situation and you're out and about, you don't want to go out because you don't ever know where and when you're going to be affected by that trauma. So we have a fear that it's going to happen, or we're going to be embarrassed in front of strangers or people we don't know well. We don't want to experience that, especially not in public. Am I crazy? How many people think that they're, but these are emotional and our brain system, our systemic reactions to what's going on. If you were attacked walking down an alley by a garage, it would be normal to be apprehensive every time you walked in an alley or by a garage, right? And you say, am I crazy? Because no, those are normal. You experience that. So you're alert, right? When I was a teenager, I got hit broadside in my car on the driver's door. And so when I take off at a light, that was umpteen years ago, right? But when I take off at a light, I'm looking to the left to make sure that the cars are stopped. Why? Because I already got hit and my car spun around once when I was young, right? So it's kind of normal. So people think that they're not rational. They think that they're not normal. They think that there's something wrong with their brains. And while the emotions and the reactions may be out of the ordinary under normal circumstances, those are just like batting away a pterodactyl that's flying at you when you're high, right? It's a response that you have to protect yourself. Rechannel our anger and our grief. That doesn't mean to not feel anger or grief, but to walk through it in a healthy way. We used to say when you're angry, you punch a pillow or whatever. Well, that does get some of the aggression out, but they've later found that that doesn't help you to reduce the violence and the anger. It actually stimulates it. So what do you do with that? How do you express it? So we want to take them from always looking at themselves as the victim, and we want to move them to survive, but not just barely surviving, but to help them flourish. And can be a long-term effort, right? To go from where you're changing our mentality that it's everybody else's fault and they're out to get me, to being a Holocaust survivor, to be able to use that and to flourish and help ourselves and other people. So gauging the recovery process. So we have different things that we're trying to work toward, and we can show people that they are making progress by marking different victory steps. Any experiences or thoughts that you'd like to share? Okay, so when we find that the fear is decreasing in strength and intensity and frequency rather, we can see that we've made some progress. When we see the anger ebbing out in the tide, less often, not occurring as frequently, not as strong, not becoming angry at some of this injustice that we see or felt, or the fact this isn't fair that that drunk driver took away my mom when I was 8 years old. Okay, that anger is calming. Okay, when rigidity will decrease. Sometimes when we're suffering, we can only accept a certain set of circumstances in a prescribed way to be able to manage. But we're finding that we can be more fluid and flexible, that when we're finding that rigidity decreasing, we find that we're moving on, we're moving forward. When we find some appreciation for something that's going on, when we find that we're getting better, we can look at things through a thankful or appreciative eye. When you're looking at a flower and say, wow, that's really, really beautiful, and getting some enjoyment out of it versus just seeing that there's weeds around the flower and the sun isn't shining that day. And we can see that we're able to, when we're functioning better, we're that some of the symptoms are less, that we're feeling better, we're responding better, we can note an improvement. Okay, we're a little bit over today, but that, I guess that makes up for some of the days that we have been a little bit short. All right, so any thoughts or questions? Not that I have the answers, but okay, sometimes we think that if we've suffered a trauma and and been traumatized or have something, a diagnosis like PTSD, that it's always going to be affecting us. But it's not like taking an antibiotic and in, a certain number of doses, it's going to cure everything and the symptoms are going to be gone, and we're not going to experience that anymore. It takes time, and I think that's one of the things that people in our surroundings have a difficulty in helping people, waiting until that recovery is a little bit more manifest. Go ahead, Bridget.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, like you were saying, it's all different type of traumas. Like my sister, she'll be 56 today. She will not get in the car and drive it. And I'm like, you know what? You're calling me to take you here, here, and here. This makes no sense. I didn't want to say it to her like that. You need to get over this, fear of your fiance riding the wall. I guess he had a little bit too much to drink. He was going the wrong way on the expressway. They were teens coming from downtown. Back in the day, they had the Hart Plaza downtown, and they would have the ribbon soul fest and stuff like that. So he was down there cooking. So he had a couple of extra beers, but he was going the wrong way, which shouldn't have been driving anyway. He might have 2 beers, but he made a wrong hook. So he rolled the wall or something, and when he rolled the wall, the car kind of tilted, and it shifted her to the back of the truck. So she ended up back in the trunk because he was looking for her, like, where did she go? So it shifted her out of her seat to the trunk into a ditch because the back door popped open. So that happened when she was 19. She's 56 today, and her words to me was, I would never, ever get behind the wheel of anybody's car. I don't care what they say. I don't care who got to go where. I'm not driving the car. Because of the way, she ended up, he was looking for her. She was in a ditch, in a hole. So he couldn't find her. And when she got thrown in the ditch, she couldn't, I guess she was out for a minute. So she had no way of telling him she was down there. But I'm not laughing at that. But she had no way of telling him that she was down there. So once he came to, like I said, he had some beer, so he looking all over the place and all this stuff was going on. So I don't know what area of trauma that would fall under, but I did try to teach her one time, and she was afraid she was going to hit the park cars. So she's like, "Oh no, that's you." She was sweating. She was, "That's it, that's it." And I'm looking around like, okay, there's nobody around. Like, why are you panicking? It's just parked cars. So you do have to, when you're in that position, you have to watch, what you say to the person who is dealing with just a different type of, trauma. Because I didn't want to come out and tell her that, like, this is ridiculous. You should be driving, and this don't make no sense. I didn't say those things. Even though I thought that in my mind, like, come on, she need to get a hold of this thing. And I did say, I try to pray with her. And, she let me pray with her, that God would, heal her and get her, calm her anxiety down. And I try to, ask her, are you ready to learn? And even talking about it, she just goes to this big, her whole behavior just changed. I'm not. I'll do it. I don't know. No, so she just like made up her mind. That's something that she's not going to do. And I'm saying in my mind, like, hey, she's 56 years old. Is she going to ever do it? This is crazy. So absolutely, what you were saying about that.
One of the things I think you said is key is that she's made up her mind she's never going to do that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But the key, of course, as you mentioned, is dealing with that wound, right? And so just this next point, it says we'll have to work with a specialist equipped to assist those with trauma that have experienced trauma. So I think that we can put ourselves through certain paces, right, and exercises to help us, or we might be able to help somebody walk through some different steps to diminish that and recover. But it is possible and probable that she should see somebody that can help her with that. Because obviously
Absolutely.
God didn't equip us to be destined us to be prisoners of these difficulties that we experience. And so sometimes you need somebody that's trained with special abilities and training to cope with those things. And obviously it was a terrible experience, and after 40 years it's still making her life miserable. Go ahead, Madeline.
Yeah.
I was listening. I'm listening, and I want to know, is that any different than getting over, a death or something? Because I'm listening in it, and it sounds very similar. The exact same situation, not the same events, but the same thought process, psychological process, in that you can't get over that trauma, that traumatic event that happened with the car accident, and someone not being able to get over, a death, and someone saying, well, you should just get over it, and the person feeling that, no, I shouldn't get over it, with the situation with the person in the accident saying, no, I'm just not going to drive. I can't get over it. I know it happened when I was 19, but I can't get over it.
Yeah, I think I think I've identified that a lot of the same steps for recovery in all the support that we give, and all the it really does, to me, come down to dealing with this in the same way that we deal with grief and loss. But there are techniques and special training that therapists have, or trauma specialists, that can help people, exercises and things that they can do. But it is, to me, yeah, I agree with you, Madeline. I think a lot of it is very similar, and there's a lot of parallelisms that we can move the same thoughts and mannerisms that we deal with people, and just move them sideways and accommodate it to their particular pain and hurts. Were you going to say something more, Bridget?
No, I was just, is the hand still up?
Yeah, it did, but it went back down, so.
Okay, yeah, I was trying to figure that out.
Okay.
I got it down.
So sometimes we do need to find a person who's been trained specially to help them, but you have to want to be helped, just like the veteran or the police officer has to want to deal with it. In the very, is it even the second or third class of the certificate course, it talks, when we do an analysis, right? And there was that example of the father who thought his daughter was addicted to drugs, which she may have been, depending on what scenario we present, that we talked about that person has to want to deal with it, to be better, and just to be compliant and but unwilling. You're just going to go through it, just like if you have DUIs, right? And they mandate, the court mandates you to go through certain classes or therapy, and you go through it, and you just, or we see very public figures, they go into some kind of rehab place and to clean themselves out or dry out, and then 6 months later they're doing the same thing. It's because they have to be able to want to cooperate. You can't, I mean, if it's against their will, it's not going to enter. It's like closing yourself off, so it's not going to have a lasting effect. So if we need to maybe help them come to a therapist, and I think healing, the statement healing comes through understanding. Being understood and seeing where I'm coming from goes a long way. You know, when we look at Job, and his friends they were just trying to tell him what he was doing wrong, and not having empathy for at first. I mean, it seemed like they did, because they just sat there with him in the dust, right? But when they're accusing him and you're feeling accused or not understood, I have a relative that doesn't feel understood, and so, you know, everything that they deal with the family is it's negative, because, you know, as one person said, well, they think they're being picked on, but they don't understand where their relative is coming from, and whereas this person is a little bit more open to me because they feel like I'm listening and I'm trying to understand their point of view. Not being alone, it goes a long way when we're walking together. It really does. Okay, so this is the end of the instruction part of the 12-week certificate course.